Nothing says England quite like football, but why is that? How did football become such a big part of English culture, and how does it work? I'll answer those questions today and give you a quick and easy rundown. Hello and welcome, or welcome back to the Language Attic. My name's Charlie, and we're here to teach you about all things British. In case you're wondering, Charlie, what exactly do you know about football? Here is your evidence. And just in case you think I'm being a fake fan or a poser or something, if I wanted to pretend to be a football fan, I would not choose a team that consistently loses every game. Like all true football fans, I support my local team no matter how bad they are, which right now is pretty bad. So, moving on to the wider world of English football. So, how exactly does football work in England? I'll give you a quick rundown on that and then we'll talk about why it's so popular. So, in England, professional teams play in one of four leagues: League Two, League One, the Championship, and the Premier League. The Premier League is considered probably the most competitive league in world football. All of the best players want to play in the Premier League at one point in their life. In the Premier League, there's 20 teams. The bottom three teams at the end of the season get relegated down to the Championship. The bottom three or four teams in the Championship get relegated down to League One, and so on. Okay, but how do you get points? So if you win a game, you get 3 points. If you lose a game, you get 0 points. If you draw a game, you get 1 point. Pretty simple. So how do you win? How do you win at football? How do you win the Premier League? So if you finish in first place and if you have the most points, you win. Congrats. What exactly do you win? You win a cool trophy, of course. You'll probably get a parade in your home city, and you'll probably earn some money from it as well. So within the Premier League, if you finish between first place and fifth place, you get to play in something called the Champions League. Basically, all of the best teams across Europe play in the Champions League, and then whoever wins that is kind of the champion of the champions. Okay, but what happens if you lose? Like I say, if you finish between 18th and 20th in the Premier League, tough luck, you have got to leave. You get demoted to the Championship. And basically, the top three teams in the Championship replace you. They come up and they get promoted to the Premier League. Okay, that makes sense. How does a team get good enough to win? That is a very complicated question, and there's a lot of factors that go into whether a team is good or bad. But let's start with the obvious. To have a good team, you need to have good players. You can't just swap players whenever you want, though. There are two specific times within the year when you can buy and sell players. This is the January transfer window and the summer transfer window. My cat has decided to join us for this explanation. Generally, the January transfer window is a bit quieter, mainly because it's the middle of the season. So, if a team's already done really badly for that first half of the season, buying a load of expensive players might not even save them at that point, so it's not really worth it. At the same time, if a team's doing really well, they might not necessarily want to sell some of their best players and buy new ones. In the summer, it's just before the new season starts, so it's the best time for a big overhaul. If you have problems with your squad, if you don't have any good players, if you want to get rid of some problematic players, the summer is probably the best time to do it. But you can't just spend £1 billion buying all the best players. That's not how it works. There are specific limits on how much you're allowed to spend and how many players you're allowed to have in your squad. I believe it's 25 is the maximum limit of people you can have signed to your team. But there's also specific limits on what nationality the players can be. Obviously the Premier League is English, but because of how popular it's become worldwide, a lot of the players are foreign now, which means that English players can sometimes be a bit of a disadvantage. So there's this rule where you can have up to 21 players from other countries, but if you have English players, you're allowed up to 25. So basically, you get extra players if they are English. And there are also some other benefits. For example, players under the age of 21 don't count towards this number, so you can have more of them if you want. Okay, so how much can you spend? It depends on how much money you have, really. Some clubs have a lot of money, some clubs have less money, but there are still rules in place, and if you overspend, you might get deducted points. Although, this is kind of shady, not gonna lie, because some of the bigger teams can get away with doing things that no other team would get away with. Okay, so what about buying players? There's a lot of negotiation involved. Obviously, the player has to decide whether they even want to come to your club and your country in the first place. But if you get the players you want, great. You're on the way to being the best team. Except not really. Each club is owned by a different parent company, and each of these companies has different goals, different finances, and different priorities. If you have a CEO who only cares about profit and doesn't really care about winning, like my team a little bit, it's not going to go too well for you, probably. There's a lot of teams in this position where they're not owned by people who really care about football. They just kind of care about the profit. Each team also has a manager, of course, who kind of controls things, chooses who plays, chooses the players. And it's the manager's job to coach the players, to give them instructions, to make sure they train, to check up on injuries, and so on. Usually, if a team is playing badly, the first person who gets in trouble is the manager, which, in my opinion, is not always fair. Sometimes the players are just bad. There's not really much the manager can do about that apart from choose different players. But if there are no good players, I don't really know what they expect the manager to do. That being said, there are plenty of times where the manager can be at fault for how a team plays. For example, the manager chooses the formation. If a player is playing in a formation that doesn't suit them, they might not play very well. And sometimes there are combinations of players that work better and players that work worse together. You can have the best squad in the world, but if the tactics are bad, the team's going to be bad. Sometimes the players even argue with their own managers or the fans. They're very passionate usually about what they do. And sometimes a player really wants to leave the club but can't for some reason. It's like they're held hostage, which is kind of funny. Sometimes it happens where midway through a season, everyone hates a player and everyone wants them to leave and the player wants to leave, but they have to wait until a transfer window, so it's kind of an awkward time. Okay, so now you know broadly how football works within England. But how did it get so popular? I also asked myself this question because it really seems that, there's a lot of other countries where football is popular, but England is next level. The first and most obvious answer is that we invented football. We invented the sport, and so obviously it's going to be popular here. The English Football League was founded in 1888. That is a long time for football to gain popularity. There's a sense of history and national pride within English football. My team right now is pretty bad, but in the past we did win things. We were champions, and I feel like a lot of teams have that kind of mentality of like, okay, we might not be the best now, but look how we used to be. We can do that again, and our city will become even better. You've also probably heard the story of the 1966 World Cup if you know much about football. In 1966, England won the World Cup, and that was a monumental time for football in our country. You've probably heard the song, it's played everywhere, every year. Anytime the Euros is on, anytime the World Cup is on, you will hear this song. And especially when a country is going through hard times, football kind of serves as a point of unity to bring people together to cheer for a common goal. On a smaller but arguably more important scale, um, football brings a sense of community and it brings people together, and it always has. In England, each team represents a city. My team represents Wolverhampton. Man City represents Manchester. Man United also represents Manchester. There's a bajillion teams that represent their area of London. And so it's not just a sense of, a group of people with a common interest. It's a source of local pride, which is really lacking sometimes in the UK. A lot of people are saying right now that we need to have more pride in our country and be more proud of being English. But sometimes it doesn't feel like there's much to be proud about, especially when you live in a city that's not so well developed, not so popular, not so big. It's easy to say that when you live in London or maybe Manchester or Liverpool or something, but if you live in just kind of like a random medium sized city, there's not really much that you can advertise to people. When I tell my foreign friends about Wolverhampton, what exactly can I advertise? What can I say that we're proud of? The one thing I can always tell people is we have a football team and we're pretty good. Football has always been a surefire way of uniting local communities. It's always an easy topic for small talk because, if you're anywhere in the local community and you meet someone new, chances are you can make some kind of conversation about football, at least probably if they're a middle aged man, maybe other people not so much. But in general, you can say something about football. It brings people together and they can, celebrate together, they can complain together, they can just generally be on the same page. And it also ties into pub culture, which is also pretty popular in England, although these days maybe not so much, but pubs are a big part of what people think of when they think of England. A lot of people imagine you go to work, you go to the pub with your mates afterwards, and you watch the football, or maybe you go to the game yourself. Speaking of which, the football club itself and the football stadium is usually the centre of the city or the region that it's in. It's not just a football stadium. They always do some kind of events, they maybe do jobs fairs. There's always things going on at the football stadium that kind of make it the centre of the city. And there's usually charity events where the players or the players' families or the football club in general give back to the local community in some way. So it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship. Because if you think about it, a lot of the players, well, basically all of the players won't be from this city that they're playing in. So for them to be able to give back to the local community for their support is great. Long story short, it's more than football. It's a sense of community, it's a sense of local pride, especially for a city that might not have much going for it and where the people really need some motivation to, be proud of where they live. And it's generations of people who support the same team. Okay, apart from the, really philosophical stuff, why else would football be popular? There's so much drama, guys. There's so much drama. Football is always a great source of controversy and debate and drama. I'm sure you've probably seen back in the day newspaper scandals about certain players cheating on their wives or, I don't know, doing something, moving teams and, betraying their old team. Or you've maybe seen clips of things that have happened in a game where a player has done something that shocked everyone, or there's been a crazy impressive goal, or there's been a really surprising result where a small team beats a bigger team. In general, football has a major stage in the English media. If you find a local newspaper in England, there's gonna be at least a page on football. Sometimes it's the front page, sometimes it's not, but there's always gonna be something. Even in the off season between, when the season finishes and when the next one starts, there's still stuff to talk about because there's gonna be transfer rumours, which player wants to come to which club, who's making offers, where are these rumours coming from? There's also friendly games, which don't count towards earning any points, but they're just kind of like practice for the local teams to get ready for the new season. And there's also international games where, maybe if your club's good enough, you'll have to travel to see them play against a Spanish team or a Dutch team or something like that. In general, there's a lot of things to talk about in football all year round. It's a never ending source of entertainment and drama. Okay, but what are some of the problems with football? What's changed throughout the years, and what kind of problems might there be with it? Of course, there's never not going to be problems where money is involved. There's certain clubs, such as mine, such as others, that are in a bit of a never ending sort of debate with their ownership. It's a bit of a constant battle where the fans might not like the people who own their club, but there's not really anything they can do about it. English football, thanks to its popularity, is unfortunately becoming a very quick money making scheme for international businesses. And this means that the people in charge sometimes know literally nothing about football and probably shouldn't be in charge of a football club. Running football clubs like businesses has led to a massive shift in the culture of English football. It's led to a drop in quality and a drop of passion. And in general, it just has kind of decreased people's love for the game. Speaking of things that really ruin people's enjoyment of the game, one of the most controversial ones is VAR. VAR basically means that if a referee makes a decision that people disagree with, he can go over and watch a video replay of what happened and change his mind if he wants. The problem with this, though, is it's marketed as objective, but it's really not. I don't have much to say on this one because it really can go either way depending on the situation. But yeah, a lot of people really hate VAR, so bear that in mind. As well, international competition is just in general changing the game a lot. As I said previously, in the past, maybe like 30 years ago, most of the players would be English, whereas now there's a lot more competition with international players, especially from like South America and Europe. And it's great. It means that the Premier League is, the best of the best, where we get all the best players. But at the same time, it kind of causes some problems for locals who want to pursue football as a career. There's been a lot of clubs in the past where they've kind of been well known for, raising local kids, training them as they grow up, and then they play for their local team. And that's been, a massive source of pride is that you can take local players. But that's kind of becoming a bit harder nowadays because the competition is so fierce. The room for local players is lower than ever, at least in the Premier League. In lower leagues, there's still a lot of English players, don't get me wrong. But in the Premier League, it is just the best of the best. And, obviously the best is going to come from all across the world, not just the UK. So yeah, to summarise, the Premier League having the best players from all across the world can benefit it in certain ways, namely the quality. But sometimes these players coming from such various locations can really cause a bit of a rift with the fans in terms of closeness. The fact that these good players are bought and sold by different clubs all the time means that sometimes they don't really stay at a club long enough to gain any sort of respect or recognition with the fans. And on the opposite side, a lot of the players themselves probably won't feel much affinity to the club because they can just move on whenever they want. And while we're on the topic of the fans, it's very well known that football fans have a reputation for being violent. This whole thing even has a name, football hooliganism. Please go look it up because there's a lot more that can be said by other people than I can say. But yeah, it's very common for rivalries between local teams to be really intense and really dangerous, which obviously is not great for the sport as a whole. And another problem is with football becoming such a money making scheme, fans can't keep up. Football has always been a game for the working class man. It's always been, the local guys who come from work and go to the match or watch the match with their friends at the pub. It's not like one of those sports where it's for rich people. It's not like, horse racing or something. It's always been a game for the average person. But nowadays, that's becoming more difficult because the season ticket prices are rapidly increasing. And it's all well and good if your team is really successful. Yeah, you might want to raise your ticket prices and make more profit because your team's really good, but the fans are still the same fans. Not even just the tickets, but the merch prices, the TV subscription prices are just ridiculous. No one can afford them. And it's like the people in charge forget who their fans are. Without the fans, where would the football team be? So, unfortunately, with everything becoming more expensive, it's becoming a lot harder for fans to really show their support for the club. You might think that, oh, but surely if they're losing fans, they would see that as a problem. They don't want to do that. That is kind of true. But the thing is, with the Premier League becoming so popular worldwide, there's a constant stream of new international fans who can be marketed to and who can take an interest in the football. It's got to the point where I watch a lot of Thai dramas. I've at least 3 times seen a random scene in a Thai drama where they're watching a Premier League football match. It's not just English people who are fans of English football now. It's the biggest league in the world. There's people all across the world who are fans of it. And that means that sometimes the clubs are willing to sacrifice the local fans in favour of the international fans a little bit if it brings them any sort of profit. And again, the thing is, these international fans, they're probably not going to choose a team like Wolves who aren't doing well right now. They're going to choose the coolest team, the most successful team, the team with the best players. And that kind of widens the gap, which already exists in English football, where there's the top 6 teams who are really successful and really rich, and then the other teams kind of can't really compete with them, and it's really hard to. And that's why it's so special in English football that you support your local team rather than just whoever's the most popular at that time. The thing is, English fans can't just stop supporting their team. I can never support another football team in the UK. That just is wrong. Wolves is my team. I could never suddenly switch up and be like, okay, I'm going to be a Newcastle fan. Like, that's just not how it works. It's like my blood type. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm from Wolverhampton, so I'm a Wolves fan. You don't choose the team chooses you. You support the team that your parents support, or your boyfriend or your girlfriend supports, or whoever is close to you who's into football and got you into football, you'll support the same club as them. There's no picking and choosing for any self respecting fan, which makes it even harder when the ownership is running your club into the ground. The only thing you can do in that situation is to protest and stand up and fight back. But again, with the amount of power and money that these companies have, it's not so easy. So, long story short, we learnt how English football works. It's pretty similar to everywhere else in the world, but the scale of it is just massive. We also learnt why it's so popular in England specifically, with it being a source of local pride for fans and a great source of entertainment in the news. And we also learn about some of the problems with it financially. So, thank you for watching. If you have learnt anything new, please give this video a like. And if you like football, tell us what football team you support. If it's your local team abroad or if it's an English football team, let us know. And if you want to learn more about British culture, please do subscribe, and we'll see you next time.